So today I want to deal with a specific reason why people have children, and again, only recently, and we covered this on the last podcast, that only recently I've come aware of this. I've always felt since I come to this philosophy, rather, I've felt that it's a very strange terminology. It's very strange terminology to have children, right? What it should be is, I'm going to create a new life, right? Because people don't have children. Number one, they don't have them. We don't own the children that we create. Yeah, they have their own lives of their own. They're not anybody's property, and they're not children. They start off as children, but they're not children all of their life. They turn into adults. And so, and I can tell you from my own experience that I fell hook, line, and sinker for the marketing ploy of nature, because I think the way I see it is that little children are very cute some of the time. They're not cute all of the time. Some of the time they scream and cry, and some babies are not cute much of the time. Some babies can scream most of the time. They might be in excruciating pain, and we don't know what that is, but most babies and toddlers and young children, some of the time, are very, very cute. They're very, very innocent. They're very cute. They're cuddly. They're smiley. And I fell for that. And I would say that definitely, if you'd have asked me after we had our second child, there was a long break, and then another 7 years later we had our third child. And if you'd have asked me then why would you have another child? Why are you having another child? I would have said, because I love children. Yeah. And actually, now thinking about it as I'm talking, what actually ended up happening is that I ended up neglecting the older two children to a degree, because this new little bundle of joy, so to speak, had come along, and I took my eye off the ball, and I ended up neglecting, and not terribly neglecting, but I ended up giving lots and lots of attention to this new little baby. Cute little gaga boo boo cute baby, right? And a lot of my attention that I'd been given to the other two was reduced, and that caused various problems. But I wanted to speak to you today about this whole idea of, that I had this child, and so many people say I love children, and therefore I'm having a child. And I just wanted to speak to that because, number one, as I mentioned before, it's it's ridiculous when you think about it, because if you love children, yeah, but do you love infants? Do you love do you love 8-year-olds? Do you love teenagers? Do you love kids when they're 13? Do you love teenagers when they're 16, 18? Do you love people in their 20s? Do you love people in their 30s and their 40s? Do you love old age pensioners? Do you love people with dementia? And so I wanted to just very briefly touch on some of the issues and challenges that a human will have throughout their lives, starting with a baby and then going through all the way through till someone reaches old age, if they even reach old age.
Yes, indeed. This is why I call it natalism, a radical form of narcissism, because obviously the having of the baby is having a dolly. It's a desire for a little dolly, a cute little dolly that you can play with. Many people have told you it completes them. They feel it completes them. Well, that is selfish in itself. It completes them. See, this is what they're looking for, something that completes them, something that they can play with, something that occupies them, something that gives them purpose. So it's all about them. It's all about the parent. Hence my calling it a radical form of narcissism. It's all about them. They never once consider the child and all of the problems that the child, and as it's evolving into a maturity, will suffer. All of the problems, all the suffering that comes along with it. And also, do they love the dysfunctional child? You see, can any parent really deep down love a dysfunctional child or a disabled child? A chronically, a very profoundly disabled child. I'm sure deep down, if the child emerges and it's disabled, the parent would think, oh my God, what have I done? I wish I had a perfect child. Everybody wants a perfect child. If they were given a choice and they said, would you like a disabled child or a perfect child? Of course, everybody would choose the perfect child. So again, it's selfish. Many children are born disabled. They're born with serious problems, issues, mental disturbance, everything, the whole gamut. We know, we can see it all it's evidenced by all the people in existence. Children are committing suicide because they can't cope with the system. See, they haven't got the resources on board and they're ground to dust. It's like a mincer. It grinds up anything that's not fully powered and not fully able to survive here. It's just completely ruthless when you consider capitalism on top of nature. I see it as a laminate. It's a two-ply laminate, the whole life. You've got nature and culture, and both of them are ruthless. So the child has to navigate both of those, and only a few get. Nature doesn't care. It just wants the strongest. The strongest survive. It's the same with culture. Now with capitalism laid on top, also the strongest survive. If you can't make money, then you're useless really in this system. If you don't get the grades at school, you're useless. You're not fit for purpose. So then you're discarded, and hence the high suicide rates with the teenagers. You see, a massive amount of them find that they can't compete here. It's like a gladiatorial situation they find themselves in, which it really is. You have to perform in order to survive because they've tied money to resources, to essential resources, food, shelter, clothing. So when you go through uni and you're expected to provide for yourself, you find you can't. Now what? You see, the parents are not going to support you. You see, because they've disowned you by that stage. The cute little baby is now an adult that requires some support, and that's a drain on the parents' resources. They may have to remortgage their house in order to give you some funds, and that's not going to happen in most cases. So you can see the child is then discarded. If they don't perform, especially in middle class children, then they're discarded. Working class children are discarded from the off because the parents just simply haven't got the resources to help them at all. So they're faced with having to find a deposit for a mortgage so they can get their own place. That's almost impossible. You see, you look at the statistics, you can see hardly any children, hardly any young adults now can get on the ladder, so-called, the mortgage ladder, and that's another issue again. The word mortgage is engagement to death. That's what it means. When you look at the etymology of it, it means engagement to death. So you're taking on something that will never end until you're in the box. Most people can never pay off their mortgages, let alone, they can't even get on the ladder to find a deposit to even get a mortgage. So you're continuously, you're locked into the rental syndrome. So where you're always paying rent and never be able to own anything. So the whole thing's crazy. You see, look at the game. The parents, it is a radical form of narcissism. That's all I'll say. Natalism, when examined fully, will show up, will present itself as a radical. You'll see clearly that it's a radical form of narcissism.
Yeah, and I'm just going to, you touched on quite a few different things there, and what I'd like to do is just to go through, as I see it, the various stages of life and the various problems that natalists are creating, and that I created with our 3 children, and perhaps you created with your one, and that everyone who has a child is creating. So it starts, as we said in the previous, it starts in the womb, where a woman gets pregnant, and all sorts of problems can occur. All sorts of problems to the baby, all sorts of problems to the mother can occur, and then so you've got pregnancy. And I'm not going to go through all the problems, but I think anyone who's intending to get pregnant should examine all those problems that can come from pregnancy. And then you've got the birth itself, which can be excruciatingly painful. One of I think my brother's wife told me yesterday that she had 5 days of labour for her first child. I mean, it's just, I just can't even get my head around that. So so you've got the birth situation, and the birth, as we said in previous podcasts, not just the mother's chosen to do this, but the child hasn't chosen to come in. But the trauma of being born, going through that process, must be really, really difficult for many, many children. And then you've got postnatal depression, which obviously that affects the mother rather than the child. You actually got a very extreme form of postnatal depression. I don't know what it's called, but there are some women who want to kill their children. And then the babies. So in the first stage of life, you've got this baby who's a few weeks, a month old, and unlike animals who seem to come out ready formed, humans come out very vulnerable, and so a lot of the time, people should get the hint from the fact that baby comes out. The first thing it does usually is cry. And I remember when our kids were really young, I was not aware of any of this, but I do remember that crying was horrible. It's a horrible sound, not just because it's just great, but because it's like the child is suffering, and in the first year, first 2 or 3 years, you can't find out what exactly is going on. You don't know what they're crying about, what they're suffering, why. You don't know what's going on, where the pain is, and what the pain's all about. So you've got that first stage, right? And of course then you don't know what the child's going to do. The child's going to run out in the street. You've got to keep your eyes open all the time. Everything is like, you bring this person into existence, and then you spend the whole time trying to prevent them from coming into harm's way. And many occasions you can't do that. You can't stop that. So that's the toddler stage and baby stage, and then you've got when, let's say, a baby starts 3 and 4, they've already been institutionalized. They're already being sent to play. It's amazing. These parents say, I want to have children. And then when the children come out, they end up, like, at the earliest possible occasion, they end up sending them to a play group, whatever they call it, or kindergarten. Some parents send their children to kindergarten from like 8 in the morning till 6 at night. And you think, well, why did you have the kid in the first place if you don't even want to spend time with this kid? So you've got this situation. Then you've got the school, right, which is which is today more than ever is absolutely crazy. Like, it's just a babysitting service. But it's worse than a babysitting service because it's subliminally teaching them some very damaging ideas that you need to do as you're told. You need to obey. You need to learn what they tell you to learn. You need to put your hand up before you want to urinate, right? All these things are happening in these schools, and then there's bullying, and there's bullying is going to happen. Your child is going to be bullied. Your child might also bully others, probably both, right? So this child, our cute little child, is going to be bullied, or is going to bully, or both. So you've got that going on in primary school and secondary school, and sometimes it can be a terrible situation, can cause a huge amount of trauma that can stay with a person for the rest of their lives. Then you've got the teenage years, where the hormones start going crazy. And the kids start acting like just absolute. It's just, I don't even remember half of it because I don't know. That's how the mind seems to work, to block out. But I know that that these hormones make teenagers behave in really difficult and challenging ways. So you've got those teenage years, and then you've got the puberty, right? And you've got one of the things that I've most, I suppose, the most challenging thing as a parent is the fact that I've given my children this sex drive, and they will be going out there, and if they're a man, if the boys, the male ones, I've got 2, they're gonna, unless they're gay, which as far as I know they're not. I wish they were, but. They're going to see women, and they're going to be attracted to we've spoken about before about the fruits, that it's very difficult, and they're going to, everywhere they're going to be attracted to these women, and these women are going to manipulate them without even knowing. And then in their teenage years, God only knows what can happen. They could get pregnant, or they could impregnate somebody, and they're going to secondary school and all the problems that are involved with school. And it's funny because like when you see people online speaking about, oh, we woke up and we realized the education system is crap, and we want to homeschool our children, but like, if you didn't bring the children to existence, you wouldn't need to homeschool them, right? You wouldn't need to do anything. They wouldn't have any problems. So you've got those problems during the teenagers. Then you've got after school. Then you've got university, which is another big scam. I met someone here in Cyprus working at a top hotel, and his father is paying $100,000 a term for him to go to some college to learn about hospitality and hotels and stuff like that. $100,000 a term. Absolutely ridiculous. And for what? To brainwash these children and for what? So then you've got that waiting for you. And then you've got, then as a child gets older, then you've got the drugs problem. I remember that my nephew told me that he was only 14 when he was first offered cocaine in school. So you've got all those pressures, and then the drink, the alcoholics. There are just, there are stacks of alcoholics out there who started when they were 11 or 12, right? I met someone recently who was in a Narcotics Anonymous group. There was a huge group of people, all of them like in their teenage years or very early 20s, meeting together. They were already drug addicts, right? So they've got that type of thing going on. Then you've got after university, then you've got all this whole slavery business, and many children are in huge amounts of debt, tens of thousands of pounds here in the UK, hundreds of thousands of dollars, even millions in America. And then they're really stuffed, and they have to slave away just to pay off the goddamn debt, right? And then all the problems that come with the 20s and 30s, and all these incels, right? And all the issues that can come up, and accidents and illness. And as you get older and older, then when you get to my age, I'm 58, then as you get older and older, all the illnesses, you get more and more likely, the odds of you getting all these illnesses grow higher and higher and higher. And I've as many of you know, I've suffered from that brunt of having a rare, one of the rarest illnesses known to mankind, and the most aggressive. So, as we get older, nobody ever thinks about that. In fact, one of the interesting arguments I've heard, or discussions I've heard around this, is that, I had my kids let me put it differently. I started 3 lives, when I was in my, when was it? Well, I was in my very early 30s until and then when I was 40, we had the last one, right? But I hadn't lived past that. I'd only lived until 40 when I had my last child, and I was 30 when I had the first one, right? I hadn't lived 50s, I hadn't lived into my 60s, I hadn't lived into my 70s or my 80s. I don't know whether I'm going to get there. It doesn't look likely, but don't know, it doesn't matter. I can see other people, right? But I hadn't actually had the experience of being old, and yet I had created somebody. I hadn't had a baby. I created a life that could go to 80, right? Not knowing what actually is like to do that. Now that I look at it and I see what other 80-year-olds, I've got evidence, I'm thinking about it now, but I wasn't thinking about it when I had the children, right? Because we don't encourage people to do that. But now that I see, 75, 80-year-olds, I think, oh my God, that seems like a horrible life. So many different ailments, and taking so many medications, and all their body faculties are falling apart, and all their friends are dying, right? And that gets no consideration. All these stages of life get no consideration from the natalists. They just think about having a baby, because babies are cute.
Yeah, you know, the diabolical nano alien DNA, it blinds you to all of the negatives. So all you're seeing is the beauty, the little baby, the cute little dolly, but you don't see all of the things you've listed there, the litany of lunacy and suffering that comes along with all the other stages. So for that reason, it's crazy. It's ridiculous when considered. But obviously, the natalists don't consider. There's no consideration at all. All they do is they consider the beautiful little dolly that they have when they create a child, and they don't consider all of the things you've just listed. So it's no wonder that the number one killer of teenagers is suicide, because it's a minefield, and hardly anyone can navigate the minefield without stepping on a mine. And for sure, we know nobody gets through the minefield and gets out the other side alive. So it's going to kill everybody. Every single body that's born will die as a result of entering the minefield, let alone navigating. Most people don't get to the finish line. They don't get to 80 without being blown up or losing limbs or being terribly disfigured physically or mentally. So for that reason, we say no to it. It's unethical. It's absolutely unethical. It's abominable. It's diabolical. So the only position to take from an ethical perspective is antinatalism, or abolitionism, as I like to call it, the abolition of slavery and suffering.
And just to remind anyone listening, if you have any objections, criticisms, questions or suggestions for us, please put them in the comments, and we will be doing some podcasts dealing with the comments that we think are worth our attention. Have a great day, have a great evening, morning, wherever it is where you are.